Hi, everyone, and welcome to Work Cookie. Today, we are going to speak about the future of work and AI. And I know sometimes this topic can be a little bit controversial because we have two sides of this. Some can be AI is great, and the other side can be AI is going to take over the workforce and take everyone's jobs, and it's awful. And and then we have somewhere in the middle where it can be great. For those that are here live, I do have some references that I'm going to put in the chat. For those that are listening afterwards, these will be in the session notes. But for those that are interested right now, here are those in the comments. So, as a general overview, I love the idea. I am not anti AI. I do love the idea of having more sustainability with it and being responsible with it. As an educator, I will say one of my biggest pet peeves is if I receive something from a student and it is very clearly written entirely by I find that. So that is a big pet peeve of mine. But I think in terms of efficiency and being able to get really easy things done, AI, it can be used as a tool. I think there's something to be said about that. That can be really neat. And there was someone, now I'm blanking, had I not been thinking about it. Her name was Joni, and Joni Connell. And I will put her name in the chat as well. And she was a humanistic AI consultant. Super, super cool. I was able to attend one of her workshops, and she spoke about humanizing AI in the workplace, which was super cool to better understand ways that you can incorporate how to use AI ethically because AI is here to stay. We don't have like a reset button. It's kind of like when the calculators first came out. People were up in arms. How like it's going to dumb everyone down. It's and we can't get rid of it. We have them. They're on our phones just like AI is. So, it is what it is. So we do just have to kind of make peace with it, but I think we just need to figure out what to do it in a way that makes it sustainable and ethical. And with that said, I want to go over to Dr. Emmy because I want to hear what you think.
Thanks, Heather. I super love this topic, and I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone whatsoever. So I know, big shock. I want to touch on a couple of things you said there, and then just add a couple of thoughts as well as I was thinking about AI and the future of work and really how it's grown and even evolved since the first time I ever heard the term AI in a real tangible way. I'll touch first on the aspect that you mentioned, which was that educator's perspective. I think what I heard a lot and what I'm seeing a lot as well among groups of educators is really the lack of the critical thinking that we're teaching students by using AI. So it's not that we're wanting to avoid its use entirely, but how do we also couple that with the concept of critical thinking? Because AI does notoriously provide incorrect information, right? Hallucinations, references that don't exist, potentially just information that's flat out wrong. And then, of course, there's always that element of AI bias built in by whoever has designed the AI, right? So, and there's some simple questions you can ask, right, just to discover it. And it's so interesting that there's really two camps here. So last week I was at Campbell University in Goose Creek, North Carolina, and this was the topic of their AI and Leadership Summit, and they had a whole host of students who were really interested. And they had a very interesting panel of educators talking about this. And it was interesting how the split was. It was about half of them, yep, I'm teaching my students how to use it and how to incorporate it into their work that they're going to be submitting. And then the other half was absolutely not. One even has his student sign a contract that they will not use it, which doesn't necessarily really guarantee, right, that they're not using it. In fact, I would suspect in some cases they are, and maybe having lack of integrity after signing something. But it is interesting that they really don't have a cohesive approach to how they share this with their students. Like some professors are saying yes, some are saying no. And so it also is very confusing for students to know about the ethical elements of it if you've really got kind of a mixed bag of responses from the educators, right? So I think that speaks to the need for a united approach, governance, and even just dialogue around appropriate use in the university environment or high school or middle school even. My high schooler came and she said she wanted to create a script for Spanish for a test. And I was like, no, we're going to do it together first, and then you can help it. You can use it to help you, but I don't want you using it to create your script and that being your deliverable or your output in your classroom. And so, because we have so many different perspectives, even within one school, one district, whatever that is, it really, I think, precedes the need for us to come up with a united messaging for students. So that educators' side is super important. And the humanization piece is often what I teach about. So the leadership model that I designed is the 7 competencies to really be able to integrate ethically an AI team member or a robotic team member, using a lot of different research that's out there in an applied research format. And at the core of the entire model is human-centric ethics. So what does it mean to now be a human? How do we define that, where we're integrating AI team members? And excitedly, I'm going to be proposing that in one of my teams in my organization who is very open to AI use, but incorporating an AI team member. And so very happy to have that conversation and try to get that approved, and offload some of the more mundane and menial tasks, but also elevate the creativity of the technology team members in their development using AI. So this is, I think, a great use case on how do we do this ethically? How do we enhance the people on the team? Maybe even produce a little more output, which is always the expectation in the business world, more, with less. How do we do that? And so hopefully hoping to use AI, and maybe I'll bring that here as a use case success in the future. So wish me luck on that one.
Hey, I love that. Also, in a non-creepy way, I have your website saved on my computer because I've been keeping up with it to see how it's developed because I love your model.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I am excited. It's actually making its way all the way to Rome next week. So
Hey.
super excited to get this out in the world. The human-centric ethics has got to be the focus. And I love that there are people doing workshops and having conversations and webinars around keeping the humanity element alive as we're humanizing not just AI, we're humanizing machines, robotics, right? It's here.
Yes, I love it. And yes, you spoke on different universities having different policies on AI. So I teach at several as an adjunct. And so one of my universities that I teach at is very open to, okay, so yes, we are embracing it. We're actually incorporating it into our assignments. And we even we have Copilot, and some of the assignments are like, okay, yes, use it, show us the outputs, how you got here, which is super cool. So then we're able to kind of go through and if it has hallucinated, let's kind of walk through on how that's happened. But then the other place that I teach at is so anti AI use but my students are still using it. So, and then I know that they're using it. And so I'm like, okay, I actually posted on TikTok last week about not my students, but about the use of AI in the classroom. And I had someone comment on it and was just like, hey, so I don't agree with this anti AI in the classroom because in the workplace, in the real world, you have people who are so far at the top, CEOs, COOs, business leaders who are using it. It's not fair to say students aren't allowed to use it because once they get out of college, you can be a business owner or a leader or an HR, and you can just use AI to go through and just write your email and do X, Y, and Z. So we're like, why is this double standard? And so while I can agree to an extent, I do also wholeheartedly agree with that humanization aspect. So I think it's just a multifaceted approach that we have to take. It's not just an all or nothing
For
that we.
sure. And we're putting students in a weird position, right? Because we're actually allowing a space where lack of integrity is something that they might reach for in order to use the tool where they're being told not to. So they may sign a contract, right? Or they may be told you cannot. So you're putting them in a really precarious position to say you cannot do this that the rest of the world is doing, and you know they might still do it, right? And that is just a complicated situation for them and what they're presenting forth as well if they're trying to gain use of the tool as well.
Right. Yes. Thank you for sharing. Lee, over to you.
It's such a fascinating topic because, like, I know that where you and I both teach, they recently, you know, got together a working group to formalize an ethical AI use policy because they said, we can't stop people from using it, but we should at least put some guardrails in. And and I tell my students, I'm like, look, do your own work because this is your future. You're here to learn some information. Does that mean you can't use AI? No, it does not. What it means is don't let the AI do the work for you. In fact, I had a conversation with a student last night about it. There are absolutely, good, ethical, productive ways for students to use AI. You know, Getting rid of writer's block, is a good example. Give me some example bullet points. Or I'm getting ready to graduate. Give me some example resume bullets. There are some really good ways, but I also tell them don't ever use word for word what the AI spits out. Because for one, you didn't do the work. And two, AI is, kind of known for hallucinating and whatnot, as Dr. Amy said. So, yeah, there are absolutely things. And one thing that somebody mentioned a week or two ago that I was like, hadn't really thought of was you can take your work and you can paste it into your AI and say, without changing the wording, please check, please help me with the formatting of this. And it will actually go through and it'll check all the little things, if you're using, APA version 7, whatever, you can have it do a check for you on that. And if you say, look, don't change my words, then you're not crossing those lines of having it rewrite your stuff. Uh, Now, it is a little different on, when you're talking in a professional sense or as a professor, because in theory, you have the knowledge already. And so you're not really cheating to use it to help you give you words. Now, I'm not saying go in and have it create everything for you because you absolutely should not do that. But you can use it a little more thoroughly than you could, and than I think you should as a student, just because of the learning aspect there. Um, and it's great for research topics, things like that. But you have to remember it's a tool, and you shouldn't use it as a crutch. Which is a key that a lot of people miss. And I like it for things like, hey, I've got these two paragraphs. Help me write a transition. Because you get an academic writing, you got to have transitions through all your stuff. Academic writing is different. Um, so I like using it for things like that, and going, okay, I didn't see that connection, but cool, thanks. So there you go.
Yes, that makes sense. Or so I'm on a migraine medication and it makes me forget a lot of like random words. And so I'll use AI. I'll say like, "Hey, I know that I know this word, but I can't think of it. But it should sound like this or it is kind of similar to this." And then it'll give me like a list of words and I can pick from that. That's what I use AI for. So, it has its uses, but don't word for word. I can pick out there are some things like, in conclusion, who is saying that this, like, in this day and age? If I have my students who are saying things that like, um, or let's delve into this week's discussion, let's not. Please don't say that anymore. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, I tend to ride on both sides of the extremes from time to time. I'm sitting here looking at my screen, and I have probably 4 icons that would shortcut me to an AI system just on what I have open right now. So it is everywhere. It is kind of ubiquitous, and it's probably a little bit of ready, fire, aim as far as the release of the technology. So there's a lot of people still kind of catching up to it, and it's both incredibly exciting because there's just a world of potential transformation because these tools are going to open up different avenues. And I think there's still a lot of people trying to put the old ways of working with the new tool instead of trying to find the new ways of working with the new tools. And it could look very, very different. We talk about education and how do you handle it? Well, is education now about just knowledge transfer, or do we have to really focus on, okay, you've got the internet in your pocket, you can, summon any fact that you want, but do you know what it means? Do you know what the context is? And do you know how to effectively communicate that to somebody? So potentially the aims of education are going to have to shift. We need to teach, a base level of how do you understand the world. And then, you have all these supplements to go out and do the really cool things that you can do with that. I think there is still value. Like I remember when the calculator was out, we had to, show your work, do it longhand because you needed to know what the machine knew. You didn't always have to do it longhand. But there are times where you might be able to do it quicker in your head than it takes to pull out your phone and tap the numbers and things like that. And so I think that trying to get our arms around the way that AI works is really, really interesting. I've picked up several books trying to understand exactly, and the more I've read, the more I kind of see is it's mimicking kind of the accidental nature of learning, where you bump into something that works and you see if it works again, and you see if it works again. And then you have, your schema for however the world works. And so it's really funny to kind of see that, and then how human thought works and the parallels that are very much there. And so it's very easy to personify the technology. We can call it Hal, we could call it, Siri and all that, and speak to it like a person. And the people behind the scenes would say, please don't say please to the AI because it's burning up a lot of energy. But I think there's still some of that sort of, you treat it humanely, you treat it like a conversation partner, and it goes forward like that. So it's just, there's a lot to digest about it. And I think that it is going to change the way that we, instruct and all of that. And I don't know that I have the right answer, but I think that on some level, you need to understand the mechanisms of it, because when we're using these large language models and we think about what goes into, what is the input for it, it might be bringing us to the lowest common denominator. People get upset, oh, you're using AI to write a cover letter. Yeah, but that's no different than me going out to, 5 different career websites and getting, resume advice and me synthesizing all of that. If I just outsource that, I'm going to get what people have deemed effective, concise, and appropriate business writing. And I struggle most with kind of the uncanny valley. I read AI and it just doesn't feel right. There's an intuition that this wasn't written by a human, or this was just so formulaic that it has no personality behind it. And so I hear it in recordings, I see it in writing, and I know it's going to keep going further and further away. But there's something to be said of, okay, read what that's doing, and then if you use your own voice, you can stand out amongst the hundreds and thousands of people who are just relying on what they're getting from AI. If you truly put yourself into it, then you have that bespoke, that unique, that tailored sort of thing that hopefully will stand out.
Absolutely. So I do a lot of reading, not just like business books and that kind of stuff, but like fiction books. And there has been, in like the book community, there has been like this massive increase in people using AI to write like fantasy books and mystery books. And it's definitely became a thing, to the point where Amazon has started taking books off of its website if it's been caught being used, like AI has been used to write those books. And it's because you can tell it hasn't been written by a human because it's lost that human element. And it looks weird. There was this one book that I had, and I have like the Kindle where you can like read the first few like chapters and like the sample. And I'm reading through it and this is weird. Like this just doesn't feel like it's a real book, but it's not a real book because you're reading it and you just can't get into it. And so I get what you mean by that. There's a comment that just came in, and then Cam, I'll go to you. It's from Mary, and she says, but what about applications and ethics in the workplace? There is a lot of debate around replacing whole jobs versus augmenting jobs. So fit starts, data governance. I am, in particular, curious on how organizations should address career pathing. So, like, think of career ladders. If lower level or entry level white collar work becomes replaced partially or in full with AI. And so, like, what would happen if, let's say, um, and then David commented on there, like, what happens if like coding jobs or accounting jobs and statistical analysis jobs begin to become replaced in this kind of reality that we're in with AI? So if anyone wants to chime in, I am going to move to Cam, but if anyone's wheels get turning with that. So Cam, over to you.
I can pivot and address that with some thoughts. If my phone's not ringing, the that's the thing about having your phone connected to your computer. But for instance, I got a newsletter this morning, one of the AI summary newsletters I get. KPMG has implemented, and they're one of the big four consulting firms for our listeners that may not know. I know everyone on the call is aware of who KPMG is, but they introduced an AI agent question asker chatbot. I think it was more of a chatbot than an agent, than a genuine agent. It improved their auditing error detection by 25% and their review time by 30%. And to those who are concerned about their job future, we're in chaos now. We're in a VUCA world now, but things will eventually settle down. And when I look at, I notice this when I try to explain what my degree is in and what the work is that I'm doing to my 86-year-old mother who's been retired for 20 years. She can't wrap her brain around it. Why? Because this job 30 years ago didn't exist. 30 years ago, we decide what color the eject button is on the airplane. Well, now we know that that's split off into human factors. That's a whole different career path. The work that my son does, he's in cybersecurity. There was no cybersecurity when we went to visit MIT in 2017. The tour guide of the computer science department said, cybersecurity, what's that? Security for computers? So there will be changes in job paths, in career paths, in job markets. I don't think it means we're all going to go to 3-day work weeks, unfortunately. I imagine we're just going to produce more and be more profitable. But there will be jobs that come out of AI that do not exist today. In the end, it's going to create jobs. And that's what I firmly believe. So I'll pause there.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Linda Ann, over to you.
This is so fun. And I think that when we talk about like the universities that have different policies and so forth, you're dealing with this huge variation in levels of understanding, levels of abilities. And so there needs to be some time where the understanding of the tool becomes more level between across the board, right? And there's always going to be some people who, still use Word as a typewriter and don't do all the things with it that you can do with Word. And the same thing's going to happen with AI. And that's part of the lack of understanding that, some people are using it to do amazing things, and I don't know how to do those things yet, But my use of AI has changed in just the 2 years that it's been out there, or 3 years, whatever it's been. And so if people are resisting it, they're missing that evolution of understanding. And I think that we're also, one of the things is I see some Gen Zs who are kind of resistant to using some aspects of AI. And they cite, oh, well, it hallucinates, you can't depend on it, all those kinds of things. But I think what we're going to see is more of the process of creating our own universe that we use AI in, making sure that it's validated, embedded, and it's going to give us the accuracy that we're looking for. So we're not getting all the junk that's out there that it typically accesses. So I think there's going to be more of a critical view of which universe the AI tool that you use functions in. And let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think, and the calculator is the perfect example, right? You couldn't use it in your tests, but now it's just part of how we do math. And I agree with Cam that we're not going to. Somebody had said, "What's that entry level job look like?" I think it was Mary, right? Well, what it means to be an entry level employee is just going to have a different definition or connotation for what that skill set is, right? They're still going to be entry level because however you come into an organization as a new grad or however that is, it's just going to have different expectations, right? So I don't think that the entry level thing is going away. I think it's just going to just change how people see work. I mean, it's happened so much in the past 50 years. Why wouldn't it continue in a similar way?
Absolutely. I always love your insights, Linda Ann. Jason, over to you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so I mean, things didn't change with IBM, right? I mean, we just kind of did our job task analysis and went on from there. We proved that, hey, this is where these positions can transition into. This is where these skills are. Within academia, I love AI. At first, not so much. It's very stressful to understand and how students can use it. However, the inclusion side of it and to have the opportunity to differentiate instruction, to maximize your reach to multiple different students is absolutely incredible. But for me personally, if it wasn't for AI and that kind of stuff, my tone would be off all the time. I'd probably lose a lot of students because they'd be mad at me. I'd have the wrong words. I'd misspell stuff I didn't even understand, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what I have learned is you can't copy and paste it, because even though you say, don't change my work, you can't trust that part. And as instructors, adjuncts, professors, whatever, we have to be transparent. We can't expect our students to do something or not do something and then us do it ourselves, is one thing I've kind of learned on that as well. So, I mean, I've used it to ask, create this depiction of this environment, having a student pointing this way at this type of thing, showing like Google Scholar and this being the academic library, and they're choosing academic library because it's safe and it supports true, evidence-based literature and stuff. But Google is a great option. However, this is the better route to go. So as far as an accommodation device, I've actually put in to do a discussion for like on on a panel or something, especially somebody with PTSD and stuff that uses it all the time, on how it just really helps us become more inclusive, even within the work environment. And I think that's one area that AI could definitely start to build upon. It's going to take a lot of, help, of course, but within that inclusive type environment. But that's just my 2 cents. I think inclusion is a very, very cool thing for AI to be a part of.
Absolutely. I like that. Yes. Dr. Emmy, over to you.
So many great contributions here. And I think just hearing threaded throughout, I feel like there's a general acknowledgement that the technology isn't going away. And so I've loved some examples there. Nick gave an example of, Googling a cover letter template, right? And so instead of using the search feature, now you're using this feature. And I think that really speaks to the value of it as a tool. And I can almost instantly tell when I'm doing a peer review now, if it's AI derived or human derived writing, like almost instantly, probably within the first paragraph and a half, I'm like, this is not human written, right? And where is the line there, right? And so typically I add as a comment, maybe add disclosure if you're using AI to write your paper for you that you're submitting to this journal. But there's not even really standards across journals for that, right? And so speaks, I think, to the nature of needing some frameworks and some guidance depending on your context of how it can and should be used. To answer the question that was asked in the chat, and I did put it in there, but there's a reskilling framework, and there's probably other ones as well out there. But the concept of taking the core skills, the underlying skills of a resource, so maybe your fast food cashier has some level of technical literacy, knowing how to work a machine or a software that's embedded within it. How do we reskill that resource into the next gen of the job if our kiosk is now the order taker in our fast food restaurant, right? And so you can use this across the board. How do we find the true underlying competencies and remap them to whatever the next gen job is? So I think there's a real tangible way for organizations to retain resources and not entirely get rid of the workforce, right? But it does require intention. And there are a lot of leaders in the tech space with AI tools that are in the red right now. And that's just the reality. People aren't paying for AI usage in a lot of cases. They're getting it added to their products. But I'm not paying for any AI. I'm getting use of it through either free open source products, or I'm getting use of it through products I've already paid for without an upcharge on it. So where are these billions of dollars going into the investment, right? They're in the red right now. And that's just the reality. So at some point, this is going to have to, we're going to have to cross a bridge with this and consider the actual tangible dollars in the organization that are being invested and what is the outcome and how has it really changed us. And that can be measurable in productivity, or we're getting more products out, right? But we really have to get a rein on that, I think, as organizational leaders. So I love the call out from the actual business side of that. And while the calculator is a great example, I'll offer one other example. Let's go back to 1998 when Google was implemented. And that transformed the way we search for information, right? And when we threw that on top of our work, there was all this open door to being able to access information more quickly that probably every person here has used or is using almost daily, if not daily, right? I definitely use the Google search function daily. But the true cautionary thing there are suspected to be tens of millions of research materials and books that have not made it into a digital format, which really is something to speak to the fragility of our digital media. So that doesn't go away with AI. There's a concept called the missing 20th century, where there are books that were published that because of copyright are not allowed even to be digitally reproduced without the author's consent, right? And so when we think about the amount of material that's not available online, I think that also speaks to this huge gap of information that we're now going to also then see in our digitized tools like AI, right? So if we're already missing it on Google, we're then going to be missing it in ChatGPT. And I heard a professor tell me early in my doctoral program, if you never open a book or you never actually look at a printed material as you're doing research in this area, you're going to miss things. You're going to miss relevant research out there. You're going to miss things that are coming out, that have come out in the past, and seeing how they've evolved over time. There's a archive at Rice University here called the Archives of the Impossible from Rice's theology department, right? And so these are tangible things that you have to schedule an appointment to go and view. And these are researchers that have researched their entire life on theological topics. If you never go step in and get your foot into that door and look at this archive of tangible materials, recordings, all of their life's work and research, this is information that is now being lost underground if you're not actually going out and seeking it. So we really need some caution as we're now moving into the next gen of, Google 18,000.0, which is now, AI. That next gen, we have to use those same cautionary conversations to students, to the workforce. We are losing a lot of printed material that will not maybe ever make its way into a digitalized format. Tens of millions is the presumption, right? There's no way to really know that. And last point, because I really care about that ethical side of it, we do need to care about what the consequences of AI are to humans. Just 2 days ago, there was a congressional hearing where parents of teenagers came and spoke out about a lawsuit with ChatGPT. And these parents have alleged that their children's interactions with ChatGPT specifically and AI tools led to those children dying by suicide. It is a very emotional topic for these parents. I can't even imagine. I have teenagers, several teenagers, right? And this lawsuit alleges that one of the children had the word suicide mentioned 1,275 times by ChatGPT in her interactions with the tool. This is an article. You'll see articles in popular press almost weekly, if not daily, about this right now. But that was a very emotional hearing. And so definitely encourage people to listen to the life experience and the impact it's making to students who are even younger, who are in their formative years, where their brain is not fully understanding the interaction that they're having with these tools. Because I think then it speaks again to the need for the ethical conversation to be the first foot you lead with, no matter what your context is in integrating AI.
Absolutely. The safety surrounding AI is of utmost importance as well, especially considering there should be a lot of safeguards surrounding it and what can be. I know, like with training it, there's supposed to be safeguards around it. And yes, Lee, when you talked about the morality in AI, well, there is no morality in AI. Yeah.
I would just to sorry to jump in real quick, but on top of that, from what Dr. Amy was just talking about, the parent company that owns the AI came back and said there are guardrails. However, in long string conversations, those tend to fail. And so a lot of these people who are using an AI companion, friend, whatever whatever you want to call it, over the string of time that they've had this back and forth conversation, that breaks down. And that's what they're saying happened with the youth in question, that things that never should have been said were said because, the AI had gone off the rails, essentially. And that's always been the big warning with AI, the Skynet thing, all that kind of stuff, is that there is no real compassion, there is no real morality, there is no real empathy in the AI. It's following an algorithm. Maybe one day there will be true AI, and that'll be maybe a different story. Right now, it's not really AI; it's a large language model. It is not actually intelligent. It's running an algorithm, and what happens when you give it control of something and it decides that the best course of action is we've seen it in science fiction, and that's actually how much of science fiction that we've seen in the past has come to pass. And so if it says, okay, well, we have this problem of, let's say, hunger, and we go to the AI and say, how do we fix this? We've got all these people that are hungry, and how do we fix this? And the AI's thing is, well, if we didn't have them, they wouldn't be hungry. That's a problem, especially if it has control of the mechanism to make that a reality. So that's why you need the person involved in the mix. When you go to an auto plant and you look at all the robots that are welding cars together, there's still people there. And it's not just because the union said they had to be. It's because you need that interaction. So that's the big danger. They talk about, oh, we're going to, in the Terminator, the Skynet thing is because we gave it control of everything in that story. That's why you have to be very, very careful that you don't give the keys to the kingdom to something that's going to burn it down.
Yes. Well, there was an article that came out with ChatGPT. Just an FYI, if you're using it for your dietary questions, be careful, because there was a man who asked it about cutting down on his sodium intake, and it told him it would be a good idea to replace his table salt with sodium bromide. And for some reason, the guy did not do any further investigation on this, and he ended up poisoning himself and had to go to the hospital because that's a poison, because he was having hallucinations and was, paranoia and having hallucinations. And so ChatGPT was wrong there as well. So just be aware, if it is giving you advice, do not take it at face value. Just like we tell our students to not take it at face value. Any outputs. Also, if you are using, like you go on Google and you do I don't know if your Google does this, but if I go to Google and I type in something, there's like the little thing at the top, and it's like the kind of like the AI results. To get rid of that, you can literally do like minus AI and it gets rid of that. But any of the AI results are just a combination of the top results. It doesn't have to be factual, by the way. Those can literally be Reddit posts that are up at the top. So I've had students who will just kind of copy and paste things from the top. Those AI Google responses at the top of your Google results page can be blatantly wrong as well. So if you're Googling things and those top results, those don't have to be right either. So maybe don't read those either. Nick, over to you on that light note.
Yeah, things took a turn to the dark side, and I think that's a very real concern. We talk about kids in their formative years. I know my age bracket, having young kids. There are stories of kids going to a framed picture and trying to swipe just because that's what they've seen and that's what they assume and that's how they understand the world. And we can say I was born before the internet and blow people's minds, but there are people in the world now that do not know the world without information at a hand's reach away. And as exciting as the technology can be and as powerful as it can be, I think there is a call for the ethical sort of thing to say that, hey, just because it's there, do we have to use it? I love my Kindle. It's fantastic, but there is still something about holding and physically interacting an actual book. And so there's that people who are like, oh, I can carry a whole library on the plane with me. Well, yeah, but are you going to read 8 books in a 3-hour flight? No, you can afford the space to put 2 books in your bag in case, one doesn't work out or whatever like that. So there's trade-offs with whatever you do. And I don't know that one way is better or worse. I think you just have to be conscious of the decisions that you've made. There's 1,000 examples of, our biology and psychology are so tied that if you go and get off of blue light, get out in the forest, it resets your circadian rhythm. And so I think there's those unintended consequences to our physical bodies, to our psychological wellness, that we need to maybe just step back and say, okay, it's there. Do I need to use it? And again, that comes into issues of self-control, of integrity, saying, I signed a contract saying I wasn't going to use AI for this project. And, in a moment of weakness, I did. Do I need to disclose that? I always struggled in my graduate program because cite your sources in a discussion. I'm like, but it's a discussion and we all read the same things. We all have the same pool of knowledge. And, that pool of knowledge now is that large language model. So who do you cite with that? Where do you give credit? Where do you say this is an original idea? This is a synthesized idea. And this is something I stole from somebody else or borrowed, or, where do you give credit with that? And it's losing some of that in all of that. And again, we talk about, if this large language model is kind of the common vernacular, there's already this shift towards, words in public discord, are changing. We're all starting to sound like AI because that's what we're reading. That's the input that we're being given, and things like that. So I think there are big sweeping things that can happen. It's not going to happen tomorrow, and the sky is not falling by any stretch of the imagination. But the idea that, Skynet is a real possibility, to Lee's point, is true. It's just a matter of, are there going to be enough people that say, I'm going to watchdog this, I'm going to stand at the sideline, and I'm going to be able to pull you out of the stream if it goes too far. And what is too far? And how do we know when we get there? Or have we already passed the point of no return, and we're just waiting for the consequences to bear out? I know that's not the starry-eyed optimism that I'm used to, but I mean, there are real consequences that we may not see until my kids are in the workforce, or, until the baby born yesterday is there. There was a article going around that George Jetson would have been born in like the last 3 years, based on and everything they see. So the idea of flying cars and all that, that was presented in the 50s. Well, now those things may or may not come to fruition, and there's different societal impacts that'll have downstream effects.
Absolutely. Cam, over to you.
Yes, just talking about our family swore off digital print book. And like when I was studying, and even now professionally, I like the idea of being able to search all the books and figure out where I saw something. But with AI trend. So for instance, this morning I was looking for how to do something. Well, what is the largest database of how to instruction? Well, it's YouTube transcripts. So who owns YouTube? Google owns YouTube. So I asked Gemini how to do that thing. That can be helpful. Another thing we need to keep in mind, and a lot, anything behind a wall by any of the models. So the journal articles that we read, AI will make up sources all the day long. They will tell you that there's research out there. And when you go to look for those sources, those journals don't exist, those issues don't exist, or that issue doesn't have the article it said it did. And if you don't have access to a large library, you don't know. Stanford has come out with a tool that will write you a little Wikipedia article based on research, and it has access to the journals, but I've not found it to be very helpful yet. And Consensus is only paid. That's a tool that purports to have access to evidence-based and scientific query. As to it does seem that a lot of these problems, Lee mentioned the long conversations. It does seem that a lot of these problems come at the result of long conversations. And so having short conversations are less likely to end up believing that God has discovered time travel. Keeping conversations short seems to help with those errors. But one thing that I think that someone mentioned in the chat data governance. I think that HR departments are going to need, the next big thing is to deal with shadow AI. Remember, it wasn't but about 9 or 10 years ago that most servers were on site. The cloud was still kind of a new thing, and server space was very limited. And you had a lot of shadow IT going on. People starting their own websites for their team and corporations and nonprofits, and hackers used that to get access to company data. Well, now, if your intern has his own chat GPT, or he uses the free version or whatever, and he doesn't have it set up for privacy, is your corporate or your company secrets, is your data going out into the world through these models? And I think coming up with those sort of governance policies and communicating them and to workers and corporations is going to be one of the next big tasks for HR.
Yep. I mean, I agree. You should get on that, Cam. Linda Ann, over to you.
Well, I certainly can't speak to that topic, Cam, but I want to take a step back for a second. You know, when you talked about Google came out in 1998, I remember search engines before Google. And I think that's kind of where we are with AI right now, right? Before Google, there were several different search engines, and each had its own area of expertise. And my preferred one was Alta Vista, because you had the way you had to search it was you had to put in a broad topic, get the results, then have it search those results to whittle it down to the actual specific information you were looking for. You know, different ones had different areas of expertise. And so I think that's a little bit of a comparison as to where we are right now. We're at the very, very, very beginning of what AI is actually going to look like. And think about this. A year and a half ago, the big job was prompt engineer, right? And they were paying people like $200,000 to be a prompt engineer. And now AI does that for you. Boom. Talk about a flash in the pan. That doesn't even exist as a job anymore, right? In some levels. So we really have to take perspective on this. And when you're talking about Emmy's favorite topic, the human-centric piece, and people will say, well, it can react with empathy or compassion. No, as to Lee's point, it is only performative. And just as a reminder, people who cannot express empathy and compassion in a real way are diagnosed with mental illness, because you can tell, right? And it can be harmful. So we really need to take that into perspective as well. And one of the things is, you know, when you're using it, you always have to Cam's point, is never ever do anything without asking it for its sources and then checking those sources. Always, always, always. And also to Lee's point about the long conversations, I often get very frustrated with ChatGPT. If I'm trying to work through something, I get worse and worse and worse results, and I have to stop and start over again at a different place to get what I really need and what I'm looking for in order for it to be helpful. But yes, the responses will deteriorate over, and it doesn't take a lot. And so that's where I really find the limitations of AI, because it cannot go on and on and on and give you quality.
Thank you for sharing. Nick, I think we have time for you and then a wrap up.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've had iterations of this conversation on the podcast in various spots. And even in the time that I've been contributing, the use case and everything has exploded. And so it's a real time, real dynamic sort of thing. And again, I think it's this idea that maybe this AI is just a Swiss Army knife and it can do everything. And so it's very much a generalist. And I think that maybe we need to start parting some of this out and take away the monopoly and have it be, specific to domains or, areas of expertise. You go to one source to take care of, set up my daily tasks and help me with my calendar. You go to another, help me find avenues of research, things like that. And right now it's big, it's massive, and it seems to have no borders or boundaries. And I think that's where the human element does have to come in. Can we set the guardrails? Can we set the expectations? Can we set that? And by tailoring it and being specific, do we create more jobs? Do we create places for people to be involved so that we can protect one another from, consequences intended or otherwise? And will the productivity gains be used to create more productivity gains, or will it be used for, a social good? At this point, utilities are, electricity, water, and the internet. It is something that is kind of a basic need for society. And as we keep going down this path, those access issues are going to continue to be, at the forefront. And I think, as Dr. Emmy, is always bringing back and putting the person in the driver's seat, putting humanity back into it, because we've said it, it can feel very much, because we're relational creatures, that the AI is talking to us. It's counseling me. It has my best interest at heart. I assume it's going to give me the right answer. Well, that's because you're putting your emotions onto the tool. And if you can see that, then yes, it can help you work through those. But if you're blindly putting faith and trust in it, that's where it gets real dangerous, real fast. And anything, moderation in all things to some degree helps here. But I don't think we're going to have an answer for it. And I'm hoping that by the time we see some of the longer term consequences, we have plans in place to help those who may have gone too far. There's probably going to be new things in the diagnostic manual for, AI dependence or AI addiction and things like that. It's going to be that shift, just as we've seen throughout history. And it's harder to see because we're in the middle of it. And we've all tried to zoom out and look back and say, oh, well, what about the calculator? We could even go back and go, oh, what about the printing press? Now ideas are out there. So it's a conversation we're going to keep having. And I hope that we can find good answers and stop the bad actors before things go completely off the rails.
So very true, especially before it goes completely off the rails. Well, thank you so much for sharing. A few quick things. Lee, is your virtual mixer still this evening?
It is.
Hey.
It's I believe Tiffany is going to be leading it tonight because I have a conflict. But
Okay.
yes, it will be tonight. And the last webinar was Tuesday, which should be posted on the website by the end of the week, which is now linked off the CBOG webpage, or you can go directly to the YouTube page, either one. So that was good stuff. We had our very own Dr. Matt Lampe was discussing the human side of change management. It was very good. So if you weren't there, check out the recording. It's good stuff.
Yay. So cool. And then on the 23rd of September, there is a CBOC all members happy hour that will be at 6:30 p.m. on the 23rd. And then next week, we will continue our AI discussion on workplace well-being in AI integration in the workplace. So I hope to see you all back here next Thursday. But until then, I will count us out. So thank you for a wonderful discussion and have a great weekend. And if you guys remembered in the chat, there's that link if you want to save it and go see Dr. Emmy at 2:30 p.m. Hope to see you there. Bye, everyone. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.